This week, we chat about Marvel Cosmic Invasion with Pat Tremblay, audio lead at Tribute Games, a studio known for delivering on a nostalgic, old-school experience. Pat talks at length about the process of designing sounds in a retro style and where he took liberties to give it a modern feel. We get into all the mixing challenges with the beat-em-up game, crafting audio as part of a larger franchise, and delivering sounds for a ton of unique characters all by himself. So sit back, enjoy as we dive into some very nostalgic sounds for Marvel Cosmic Invasion with Pat Tremblay.
Special delivery. This is my kind of party.
Good morning, good afternoon, Pat. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Yeah, you are, I imagine at this point, for people who are listening to this, that you are close to shipping Marvel Cosmic Invasion. How far are you right now? Like, where are you at in the production?
At the time of recording, I'd say I'm done. I mean, as done as one can be with an audio project. I think from either it's recording songs or producing anything. I mean, no art is ever done. You just stop working on it. And I had to stop working on it at this point for a little while for us to go into certification. But I'm really comfortable with what I've done at this point. I'd call it pretty much done. And I'm just doing little mix passes and adjustments and stuff that I'm allowed to do that I can just, fine tune until the end of days, for maybe a support update or things like that. But I'd say most of it's pretty much done at this point.
It's like it's before the storm.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's really like, you just sort of put the project aside and kind of forget about it, work on other stuff, and then when it launches, you're like, oh, right, it's
forgot about you.
Really exciting.
Right, forgot about all these little mistakes that are just not mistakes anymore because they're in the game.
Yeah, and it's that I've been working on this game for over a year, and it's like there's stuff even now that I'm listening to that I'm like, oh, I wish I could just go back and redo that, because over a year your process changes and you're not in the same mindset and whatnot, and it's like there's so much stuff that I'm like, oh, I wish I could just go back and redo it, but you can't just go back. And
I don't think you ever finish a thing. I think the thing is just taken away from you. A mix that's 100% complete. I've never heard of it.
Yeah,
I would love to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, the best thing is a deadline. Like the first, albums I made with my band when I was younger was like, we've been working on this. And at some point we're just like, pressing is, because back when CDs were still a thing, it was like, pressing is in like 2 weeks. We have to finish this. And you just like, at some point, pack in a bunch of hours and just get done with it. And it's kind of the same with a game where it's like, the final milestone is this date at 4 p.m. this Friday or whatever. And it's like, okay, I'm going to cram in as much stuff as I can in there. And like, at some point I'll just walk away from it and that's it. It's like one of those cooking shows where it's like plates down or hands up or whatever.
Right. It's done. Yeah. The Gordon Ramsay, Master Chef. I think that's the one.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're cooking right into the last minute. You're like, make sure it's super, super hot, and then open the oven, take it out. Yeah.
And I didn't think we were gonna go like full on cooking show, but I mean,
oh man,
we're going.
If you only knew how many when we can talk about this later if you guys want, but like when I teach classes about sound design, implementation, whatever. Every single time I teach a class, I always make an analogy about pizza, because pizza to me is the all food, and it's there's so many comparisons to make between pizza and audio work, where it's like people consume the pizza but they don't know how the recipe was made, and you can't deconstruct a pizza and whatnot. Anyway, I have the whole philosophy, so I think it's only natural that I went to food like within 2 minutes of recording this episode. Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, Happy to hear so much about Marvel Cosmic Invasion. It's a bit of a mouthful. I always want to say MCU because it's MCI.
Yeah,
Marvel
MCI at this
Cosmic
point.
Invasion. Yeah. But I guess before we, get into that, maybe you can talk a bit about like, where you come from. You could, game wise or audio wise, like where did this journey start for you getting into the role that you have now?
Sure. I am still somewhat fairly new to the gaming industry. I've been around for about 5 years, but I have an extensive background in music and just audio production in general. I'm 38, and I've been playing music, I guess, since like the age of 7 or 8. And that includes, when I was 8 years old, learning how to make music on a computer. With very early software on Macintosh computers. I was using Encore, which eventually was like Sibelius and all that stuff. Composing, writing MIDI files and using, general MIDI and those Roland boxes and all that stuff. So I'm really aging myself at this point.
Right. No,
but
totally.
I've been doing that forever. And it's like, I think it's in probably, I kept doing that till like '05 or something. And at some point, my older brother sold me his Mac G4 that had GarageBand on it, started recording, writing songs, became a GarageBand power user, graduated to Logic at some point, used that forever. And I just went about I was in, many bands, wrote a bunch of stuff. I studied music, studied composition, studied drums, but so I've always sort of been practicing and studying music, but I never had a day job in audio because for me, it was completely unreachable.
Right.
Especially
at the time
video
where
games.
you're already is sort of like into games in general, or
Yeah, of course. Lifelong gamer. My earliest memory of gaming is not being able to play because my two older brothers were older brothers. But yeah, there was a Sega Master System at home, and sort of the earliest games I played were like Altered Beast and probably like Aliens and stuff. And eventually we just had a Nintendo. I had Zelda the Gold cassette for my birthday, played those
nice.
games.
Yeah.
And, played a bunch of Super Nintendo as well, like a maniac. Already noticed that when you step on Yoshi, the music changes. And I thought that was so interesting. So always like, it was kind of meant to be for me to land up where I am now. But it was like for the longest time, I thought it was impossible because video games for me were kind of a magic thing, like movies that happened, in Hollywood or Japan. And then audio for me was always this like professional thing that I was trying to get to, but from a musician's perspective. I was trying to get a record deal. I was trying to, make it as a singer-songwriter and all that stuff. And audio work to me was like so niche and such a closed community that for me it was just never going to happen. And that was kind of the case right up until I'd say '08 or 2010, where my brother went to Campus Ubisoft at the time, but there was still no audio department or anything like that. He started he started working at Ubisoft in I think '08 or 2010, like I mentioned, and is still there now. And I think, I started working in marketing. I worked in retail marketing for 12 years, still, honing my skills in audio and sound design, doing, contract work here and there. And you're like little things for free and whatnot. And at some point he was like, during the pandemic, I think he was like, what are you waiting for? Like, just go to Campus.in. There's a sound, course or class or whatnot now. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Maybe that's it. So
were you waiting because at that time you're probably like, oh, it's less stable to be doing sound? Like what sort of held you back?
It was the only thing that was really, I sort of had come to sort of the inner peace that was sort of never going to happen. Whereas like, look, I'm a musician. Maybe like my dream one day would be to write music for an indie game or movies. And I just kept writing and publishing stuff and whatnot, and just, getting the bands together and whatnot. But like when you're 35, 36, or at that point, probably like 32, like being in a band and touring is not exactly the most like sustainable thing. And I had a great job with great hours that just let me live out my passion on my own time.
Right. Yeah.
But that job was in retail marketing, opening stores for airports. And like in 2020, airports weren't exactly
not
the most fashionable thing. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, I got accepted to Campus and got into Unreal and Wise before that, just in preparation. And I just it's like something. It's like being poisoned or something with like no, but it's just like it's just like a revelation. It's like, oh, that's how it's done. Looking under the hood and like a passion for implementation and Unreal and coding and like the right down to, oh, that's how assets are named. And I love how assets are named, like all that stuff. And all I needed was just like this one program to first get me all the skills that were missing, but almost more importantly, just a few key contacts to get me in.
Right.
And it's like, once I had that, it was like, all right, first job. School wasn't finished. I had my first job and I've been going ever since. Just working in Unreal and Wise and all that stuff and FMOD. And then not even a year after I graduated, there was an opening for that course. And I was like, you did great. You want to teach it? And then I started teaching it right after that. So it
Right.
really
Yeah.
all happened very, very quickly. Almost too quickly for like some other people were like, who's this guy who just came in and is teaching all of a sudden? But I feel like I was just missing this one keyword. Like I had all the audio expertise and experience, and all I needed was just like, this is exactly how Unreal works and Wise works. And by the way, here's how to code in C# real quick. And that's all I needed to sort of unlock this potential and this new
Yeah.
career. And I never looked back. I'm so happy that I did that.
So you started getting into game audio at a sort of a later age. Like it sounds like you're in your 30s. And I imagine that you've been playing for games for many years before that. So yeah, I know for me, it was a magical experience when you first sort of learn about like how things happened under the hood. Has that been demystified for you, or how do you feel now?
Well, it's certainly demystified because now I know how the sausage is made. But something I'm really surprised at is that I still like sausage, meaning that one of the first classes I took when I went to school was the teacher told us, he's like, you're about to be professionally completely broken because you're going to listen to games and notice that, oh, that thing, this positioning, this. And I do that, but I still enjoy games and I still enjoy how they sound and just how the experience overall. And I can still sort of just disconnect and enjoy a game, which I'm happy that I can do. But to directly answer your question, like when I started learning how it was done, it was just like, oh my God, it's either so complicated or, oh, it's so simple. And you start paying attention to things like how many footsteps are there for this one thing? And then what happened, what made the music change to from exploration to combat or anything. So it's really like learning all these little secrets and just getting like a bunch of recipes or magic tricks that you learn and that you sort of feel like you're on the inside and now you know how to pull and just to do that most people don't really notice, but that makes really adds value to the experience. So I really love doing that, but I can still like just play a game and just enjoy it and not for a little while just not think about how it was created, which I appreciate.
Yeah. There is something about like when you, like you said before, and I think it's really interesting. It's just like it's either really complicated or really simple, and like it is kind of both. I feel like early on when I feel like was just learning a little bit about game audio, if I was listening to something, I'd be like, oh, there must be some crazy thing that makes this music switch to this state, and it's just like probably was simple. You know what I mean? Like sometimes when you learn a bit of it, you project that it's a lot more complicated.
Turns
than
out
it is.
you just stepped on a trigger and like
Yeah.
it caused something to happen and you're like, oh, that's it.
That's a huge thing. Like the first things you learn, we sort of, that I learned or that we teach to implement is like just triggers that, for, I don't know, a horror game is the example I always use, or it's like, you want some jump scare or whatever, or a trigger that'll do multiple things, that'll spawn an NPC or whatever and have an audio event, related to it. And it's just like, all it was is you went through an invisible gates that did a bunch of stuff, and audio is just part of those things. Learning all those little tricks is so fun. And some of the homework that we had that I still give to this day is just like make me like a horror map and surprise me, where it's like when I walk through, I want to hear, this thing and not notice it. I want all those triggers to be invisible and all that. So
horror is the perfect thing for that, because it's just sort of like I feel like those maps are so authored. They're so catered to a specific linear experience that you can easily blow someone away with so much stuff happening, and it's all just sort of a linear experience for something systemic. Yeah.
It's easy to
Um,
fall into the stereotypes and just go like, oh, this is a haunted house or like attraction, and then it's not as effective
yeah,
as yeah.
yeah. It'd be cool to see a procedural horror mansion jump scare
It's all about
thing.
expectations, right? So it feels like
Exactly.
it's interesting for us audio folks to be like, typically when music changes, when those, I guess, events happen, we're sort of attuned to be like, oh, how did they do it kind of thing. And horror is a great place to have this exploration of like, you're removed from it because the idea of that genre as a whole to be effective is to subvert expectations. So
Yes.
it's one of those few areas where I feel like what you were mentioning before, playing a game and like seeing all of the behind the scenes pulling of the strings, it doesn't happen as much with horror, like when it's well made, at least.
Mm,
Hmm.
There's obviously
yeah,
some, yeah, other examples where it's like, okay, well, it could have been effective, but not anymore because you know about how it's made, le saucisse or whatever. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, completely different from horror. I would love to talk about horror for the next hour, but unfortunately, we're not going to
I
do
just
that.
I just watched Weapons, by the way, last night. I loved it. I don't know if
Oh
you've
yeah, that was
seen
a
it, but
great, super
great
good movie. Yeah, yeah,
Last thing
yeah,
I'll say about horror.
yeah. Whoever's listening to this,
Mhm.
watch Weapons. It's super
Yeah,
good.
it's great.
Yeah. So to divert from horror and talk about completely not horror, the games that Tribute Games make, which are
Hey, maybe one day.
hey,
It'd be
maybe
great.
You never know.
a retro horror kind of thing. Actually, could be cool. Could be really cool. Yeah. So tribute games. From my perspective, I guess they make a lot of retro type games. Well, I guess how did you start with tribute games and sort of like was that genre kind of like did something about that genre pull you into working with them?
Definitely. Like, of course, the first games I mentioned when I said I used to game a lot was really early stuff. And still to this day, I love playing old games. I'm not as much of an expert as some of my colleagues. Like beat 'em up data and like how those things are made it's a whole science and it's really impressive. But for me, like just the experience, the memory of playing those games is really strong. And I also love our entire philosophy of just how we develop and how we release stuff. We make games, we finish them as much as we can, we release them, and then if works, whatever, we'll make a DLC or anything. And I love that about sort of the simpler times of making games. And it's at first I didn't know much about Tribute. I knew them from TMNT, and I worked for a while in attractions. I made like arcades, and I made live attractions. What at Wise they call LBE, which is it LBE? Location based entertainment, which is
Right.
like
Yeah.
very expansive, all done in Unreal and Wise and whatnot. And that was my thing for a while.
Okay.
But I wanted to really, make games like the games we just made, and when the opportunity arose to work at Tribute, I was like, man, this could be so cool. And I didn't know what project I was going to work on when I interviewed them. It was just like, yeah, they're the guys that made TMNT. TMNT rocks. It like slaps. And I was like, I want to be a part of that.
Did you
And
know
my
folks
first
over
day,
there or?
I knew people who knew people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
The
yeah. I
magic of
didn't know.
contacts.
Yeah, it's like I said before, like some of those key contacts that I got in school, I paid off even at Tribute. Shout out to Antoine, who you guys had before, who remains my teacher with a capital T. Great guy who taught me a lot and got me a lot of the opportunities I've had in the recent times. But yeah, so when I started Tribute, it was like I'm still working in Wise Unreal and these really like big projects and these things with like 36 channels and whatnot. And it's like, this game is in stereo. The sounds are not positioned and it's very simple, pixel art, and you're not working in Wise or Unreal or Unity even or anything. It's like we have FMOD for this project and it's a custom engine that we built. It was really fun for me to sort of forget everything I learned and teach to make games like that sound great, that are really fun to play. And it's kind of a more simple thing where it's not exactly mobile and it's not AAA, but it's like this still very produced, polished game, but made with simple tools to make games that kind of play like you remember old games playing, right?
I mean, that checks out because I feel like the further back I go into Tribute's timeline and look at the games that they're working on, it gets more and more 8-bitty.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that the sort of the engine that they created for that is just sort of, catered to the very specific thing that you guys do. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really powerful. It's like, even for audio, I give myself creative boundaries, but the tools I have, I could create anything with, right? It's like buying an 8-track to make a record or a tape machine, because that's the aesthetic you're going for. I still use Reaper and I use FMOD and I use very expensive, expansive plugins to make some of the sounds, but all for it to sound as much as possible like what we think a retro game is or sounds like. And the engine is kind of the same, where we've built this beautiful, powerful engine to make a 2D game, but that 2D game runs insanely and is super optimized, and it's a great technical achievement in itself. So it's like we use these super powerful tools, but to restrict ourselves, sort of, and it's creative boundaries that we give ourselves at this point.
Yeah.
They're games that we made, like Ninja Senki or games like that are. And I'll have to ask Joe, our other co-founder, about that, but like some of them are coded like to work specifically on Sega Genesis. Like that's how retro some of them was. And like I didn't write the music or make the sound for some of those games, but like they were made in Devilmask and they were made with software that is somewhat limiting and very truthful to the tools that people had back then. And that's for some of those games.
Are you guys playing your old games on Sega Genesis in the office, or?
I think it might work. I usually play them on Steam, to be honest.
Okay,
but
makes sense.
But I'm pretty sure, Joe's going to kill me for not knowing this, but I'm pretty sure they're compatible for some of them. But the rest is sort of the aesthetic, where it's like I said before, like we have tools that are really powerful, but we're going to stick to an aesthetic sort of as a pastiche to feel like like it's a game for Super Nintendo, or for Nintendo, or kind of lean in one direction or the other. And for me, in the audio world, it's kind of the same, where, I'm also working on Scott Pilgrim, and that game is a bit more retro and feels just visually more retro, and the sound design is as well. Everything I do for that game has a layer of chiptune, of a sort of a chiptune texture. And even there, like I use a plugin from, I think, Matt Montag called NES. It's just called NES. And it doesn't run perfectly, but it's so faithful to those sounds. And I just always have a little layer, and I always sort of create my sounds with that. And that, with the visuals and Anna Managuchi doing the soundtrack, really fits in one aesthetic. Marvel is a bit different, where like at first I was like, okay, this is a retro game. We make retro, we're kind of a retro company. And the first sounds I made were very crunched, very bit crushed, very either NES or SNES. And I have all these beautiful apps that Plog here from Montreal make. Like MD and SFC and all the chip crusher stuff and chip synth stuff. Shout out to them. I think what they make is very nerdy and awesome.
What was the name of that company again? Sorry.
It's Plug. Yeah.
Oh, just Plug. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Plug, but in French, Plog.
Plog.
PLOGE. Yeah. But so okay. I bought all that stuff just trying to find an aesthetic and trying to find a sound that would fit the visuals. And I remember the first character I designed was Nova, and Nova has like this charged attack where he just explodes in this solar flare. And it was like, it was Nintendo noise and like, and it was cool, but I was like, yeah, but the visuals are cooler than that. Like the audio has to sort of pay homage to how sick the visuals are. And like TMNT has a bit more of that aesthetic, where there's a lot of bit crushing and noise and all that. And all I did for TMNT was some of the DLC stuff, and I had to follow what my predecessor did. And it really fits for that. But like Marvel is something else. It's a different beast. And I started designing in this sort of retro fashion for Nova. And then I was like, what if I just go all out? What if I say like, screw it. It'll be 16 tracks for this one sound, and there'll be like, 2 vocal layers and this one thing from Boom and this one other thing from Soundmorph, and this thing I'll go record in the backyard. And the first time I do the special attack, I'm like, all right, that's it. I think we're going
Right,
AAA for
right,
this
right,
thing.
How did the team
So,
react to that? Were they expecting it, or?
I'm not sure. Like it's a weird thing at Tribute where we're such a small team that it's sort of like, here's what I did, and everybody's like, that's insane. Let's go. And it's kind of the same for audio, where like the first sort of designs I made, they were like, oh, okay, this is something else. Like this game's gonna be packed with audio. And I think they were all happy to sort of follow the same aesthetic, where like we don't hold ourselves back for visual effects or music or anything like that, where it's like, oh, it has to be retro, so we have to. No, it's really like, yeah, it's pixel art and it's a smaller game, but what makes it awesome? Okay, this big of an animation, let's go. If time permits, we'll make it awesome.
Right.
So it's kind of the same for audio, where like I almost shot myself in the foot because I really scoped it larger than I thought it was initially going to be. But really designing sounds to the best of my ability was a thing that I really understood quickly. And then I was like, oh yeah, but if I do this thing 3 times, I want to hear variations as well. So like very designed sounds and variations are 2 things I added that are not normally found in retro games nor tribute games, but that I think really add to the experience.
Right. I'm kind of curious, how far did you go down that territory? Because, when you think of these big AAA games and, big abilities for characters, you think of, okay, like the initial transient has a ton of variations in the body, the tails, different layers are being implemented in, say, Wise, FMOD, or anything like that. Did you do that, or was it more just sort of like, hey, here's one ability, couple of variations? How far did you go with that?
So, I used to make ambient pads with like, 200 1-second little snippets that sort of randomize, in a whole thing. And at this point, I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I love doing that stuff, like super procedural stuff. I love doing that stuff. Mm-hmm. That said, I don't think that was the appropriate platform or project to do that. But I still wanted people not to sort of feel like, there's a sort of feeling when you're playing a game, especially a more retro game, with like some sounds are going to come back. When you hit pause, it's always the same sound, right? If you pick up something, I think it can always, some things that are very arcadey, you expect the same sound to play all the time. But things like voiceovers that say, I'm out of ammo, I think is really cool to add some variety to that. Because yeah, it's cool to hear it, but if you hear it 3,000 times during a playthrough, you're like, dude, I know I'm out of ammo. But then if you hear it, you hear like 3 or 4 or 5 different variations, you're like, oh, that's cool what they did. And now you're kind of looking forward to being out of ammo because you get to hear the other variations. So that was kind of my approach with like, all the sounds are baked. There's no like, this tail plays with this thing or whatever. It's like, if there's a special attack and I made 4 variations, I bounced 4 different ones, which like in the tracks, the things are different. But then you'll hear like really like 4 different sounds that are variations on each other.
Okay, so you sort of pick and choose the areas where things need to feel a bit more nostalgic and be like, okay, this is reminiscent of the past. Whereas other, I guess, sounds or opportunities for use of sound, there you'll go like, okay, let's polish it up and make it modern AAA sort of levels of quality.
Yeah, that was my approach. It was like, I think all the UI stuff right away was like, it's just one sound. It'll always be just this one sound, makes it very arcadey. And then, a punch, like an attack 1, which is for 90% of the heroes, a punch, like I'll make 4 of those because I go like, and it'll sound a bit different. And while you're playing, you don't really notice it, but I just wanted to have a bit more variety so it doesn't feel so repetitive all the time. So like most heroes, most bosses, enemies, all that stuff have at least, between 2 and 4 variations, depending on the attack and whatnot. And then specials, because every hero has a special attack. Specials is one sound because it doesn't come often, and it's this one special attack. So I'm like, I'll just do one special attack. So it's really like this navigating the sort of middle ground where I went like, this needs to be varied and this needs to just be one thing because that's usually how it is. And I sort of found my way in there. Was like, okay, this will be 4 variations. There'll always be 8. There'll always be 1 or 2. Yeah.
Kind of funny.
Okay,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Okay. Well, to me, it just sounded like you're this. Okay. The image it paints is basically you're sort of the sound designer from back in the day that has access to like, we have more memory, we have more resources everywhere.
Absolutely,
you still
yeah.
have to work within the constraints of like what is known at that period. So you have to fit that sort of bill. But at the same time, I don't think no one from that era wanted to be like, okay, well, our voice is going to be like mandatory requiring subtitles because it's going to be bit crushed so much that it's going to be like, and like having one punch for all characters and stuff like that. So it's cool because it's a different sort of authenticity to me. It reads as like what they wanted to make. Not everyone. Like I don't want to be generalizing too much, but yeah.
No, you absolutely hit it right on the nail on the head right there, because that's how I think most of the time. It's like, what if I was a sound designer in 1995 and I had access to these tools? And what would I do? And I'd be like, okay, I don't have like 100 gigs of audio like Call of Duty or whatever. We still want the game to be small and easily downloadable on mobile or Switch. And like down to how long my tails are and how long my exports are, where I'm like, oh, if I lose, if I have half a second extra for every sound, that's just space I'm taking out for nothing. So I really keep things squeezed. And sometimes I have just mono sounds because I know it takes like less space. And it doesn't need to be like hyper large or whatever. It's just like a single punch. It's in mono because I know it takes less, disk space. So I'm like, I'll be conscious of those things and trying to keep it somewhat controlled, even for my own sake, because otherwise I'll never finish. But then again, I'm like, what if I had those tools back in the day? That's probably what I would have done. Like, it would be cool to hear 2 explosions and not 1. Add some variety. So I'm sort of, it's sort of keeping in line with the retro boundaries and whatnot, but still kind of going like, yeah, but. It's cool to have some.
You're kind of playing what the retro sound designer from back in the day, like what their dream would be.
Exactly.
You are their dream.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm like, no, and it's like, no limits. What would you do? And it's like, okay, well, let me impose some limits on myself and make the best game possible. I also don't believe in 50 variations. I think it doesn't make sense. And, I think you play games like Japanese games sometimes for footsteps have like 2, 4 variations.
Yeah, and modern games too, right? Yeah, you listen to them, they stick with few variations that really, I think, get to the sort of character that they need to be. Which is a question I wanted to ask before, bit of a curveball question. Sorry if I'm derailing this a bit, but so are there any sounds in the game that happen super frequently that there's one variation? Because you talk about the specials. The specials sound like they don't happen super frequently, but something that happens all the time. They're like, oh, just one. This one has the character.
A lot of the VO callouts, because something we did that's really cool is that if you're playing, let's say, Storm and Spider-Man, you can swap between 2 characters, because every time you pick a character, you actually pick 2. So it's sort of a tag system. And when you swap, Spider-Man will say something relative to Storm, and then vice versa, right? So there's a lot of swapping involved, and those, like, there's different variations just for that, for every character. So Storm can say 3 different things for Spider-Man, and Spider-Man can say 3. So there's a lot of variety, but the swap sound effect, the little like, is just one sound, and it might happen like 5,000 times during the game.
Right. Yeah, I guess you're not gonna notice it as much. Or also, it's the kind of thing that when you're playing, you want that instant gratification, and is very much, it's expected. You're expected to hear that sound the same way. There's the dog.
Someone at the door, as predicted.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good. But yeah, there's some stuff like pickups for me were a thing where it's like, it's a very arcadey sound. It's feedback, and I don't think there's much of a point of making 4, 5, 10 variations for that. It's like you pick up a health crystal, you know exactly what happened, even if you don't really look at it. So there's a language in there where it's like, okay, crystals have this thing, and then focus crystals are this, health crystals are that, but health food is also, it's sort of a Venn diagram in the audio signature where at that point, if you're not even looking or you're chatting with your friends because it's a couch co-op, you just picked up something, like, oh, that was a health crystal because it's my 5th one, and it's always this, the same sound. So there's a lot of stuff that just happens this one variation, but a lot of other stuff like punches and deaths and creature deaths and whatever, that I just wanted to be varied, so I added more variations.
It makes sense. I could imagine that there's going to be a lot of sounds in this game, up the music and all the punches and stuff, that when you're picking up a health crystal, you just want to know that
Yeah. it
Did
has
I
to
do
come
that thing?
through
And
as
if
well.
there's
Yeah.
variations and it creates a bit of muddiness, a bit of uncertainty in the player of like, wait, was that a health crystal or not?
Because when you
Yeah,
make
it is.
variations, they have to sound varied. So if you want to have a sound
Yeah.
that's readable and iconic, you can't be like, okay, I'll make 5
Yeah.
different versions of the pickup that are
Yeah.
almost the same. It's like it sort of loses its purpose at that point, I guess, right?
Yeah, and variation for variation's sake, to make it sound more real, I don't think is worth it. And that's something I really teach sort of when the students at school make their final project, they actually make a game. So they design sound for a game that the other departments are making. And like sometimes in the WISE projects, I see 50 variations for something. I'm like, guys, what's the point? And I'm like, first of all, your sound isn't all that great. Real talk, So first of all, make one awesome sound, or one, it doesn't have to be awesome, but I mean, one sound that really conveys whatever's happening. And then make me, like, if that sound works, cool, we can make more variations. And something that, some of my teachers were some of the people at ADOS, like Vince Dargy and Fred Arnaud, and like people that have been working in game audio for a long, long time. And like some of the things they taught me was like, dude, make a sound, put it in the game. Start there. It doesn't have to be the best, game of the year, best audio sound. Just make the sound that you think, could work, put it in the game. And you might realize it really, really doesn't work. And you have to go in another direction. But if it works, then you're like, all right, let's make a couple more variations. And I don't always follow that because, usually, libraries are so well organized. I'm like, okay, I need 4 variations. I'm going to drive the 4, these 4, put them in, slice it, whatever. And I sort of always create my 4, 5, 10 variations at the same time. But I still like this philosophy that it's like, if there's one sound that really works, it works. Because that's the thing about audio. It's like most people I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't actively listen to game audio. They just assume it happens. Because I think audio or sound is just such a big part of life that most people, when they play a game, they sort of expect sounds to just be there. And a lot of people don't understand how much work goes into making sounds for a game. So a lot of the time, I always joke that it's like, if it's like a programmer, it's like, if you're doing your job well, you won't hear about it. But if something is wrong, trust me, you'll hear about it. And especially in sounds, it's like that sound is annoying as hell or doesn't work. Yeah, you'll immediately hear about it. And it's kind of the thing where it's like, you have to make sure that all the sounds work, are not annoying, especially in a beat 'em up like that, where they all sort of work and are not annoying and serve the game. And it's a really touchy thing to sort of navigate.
Right.
I think it's a huge... Yeah. No, go for it, Dan.
It's that delay again I was mentioning before.
Yeah.
But no, to me, again, just to riff on that, it sounds like having 50 variations does have its place in very specific sort of scenarios. And I agree with you on that emphasis on quantity over quality for sure. And just to re-emphasize on that idea of having 50 variations for footsteps or punches and stuff like that also means it's 50 times the work of like reviewing that sound, because you want to make sure all the variations are not annoying. They all gel well in a progression with one another. And so, yeah, it's another reason. It feels like now that we have like near infinite resources in terms of what we can put in the game, it's a new challenge, I guess, for the modern generation of sound designers to be like, no, you have to pick and choose the best one. And like, it's not because you can put 200 sounds that you should put 200 sounds.
Yeah, it's okay to hold back. Sort of. It's okay to, it's okay to just have 4 chords in your song. If it's a great song, it'll be great. So I really have the same approach and I had to learn that, not the hard way, but like by myself working on projects like these, where I was ready to make, 10 variations minimum for everything. And I was like, yo, I have a year and a half to make this game. I'm not going to make 15 characters, 15 bosses, 15 levels. I wasn't going to make it. So I scaled it back too as well, where like some of the bosses had a lot of variations. And at some point I realized I wasn't going to make it. So the later bosses, some of the attacks only have 2. And I just went ahead and deleted all the other stuff as well to be super consistent. Right. I was like, at least there's not just one. And if there's one, they're all kind of cool, so it works. But at least there's a bit of variation here or there. Mm. And, if you have different variations with pitch and all that stuff, it sounds great anyways. Nobody's going to notice. And, to go back to how much sound there is in this game, it is incredibly chaotic. And it was quite a challenge to mix. And I don't think I'm done yet. I love when we're just playing like 4 players, because I get to hear how chaotic it is. and sort of still under control. It kind of is where, and I had to make some really bold, no, not bold, but like strict choices for when VOs come in and need to tell you that we need to get to the helicarrier or something. I want you to hear that, so I'm ducking a bunch of stuff. Like the music ducks by at least 12 dB or something, and SFX as well, just so that VO can go through. But that's the power of FMOD and having these tools where it's like, you know, you play some old games where it's like the VOs are like, welcome to die. And it's just, you need this subtitle to, did you really say that? And it's, you know, you have to control what's happening and whatnot. And like, when you're playing this game, there's music all the time. There's punches, there's call outs, there's systematic VOs when you do attacks. And then on top of that, there's narrative stuff. I really had to have a sort of strict mix where it's like, there's 2 speakers and that's it. And everything has to go through there. And people are talking over that. You know, most people might be just, you know, riffing or whatever, but things have to go through and sort of take the space, kind of like a pop song where it's like one thing can be in focus and that's it. And I always play sort of solo with sometimes the music muted to see what's happening. And I have to remind myself to, unmute the music all the time to make a consistent mix, and then also play with my colleagues to make sure that it sounds great when 4 players are going, you know, and the attacks and all that stuff. It's really, and it's like, there's no limitation as to, there's a sound that happens, you're going to see, you know, if an attack happens, you're going to hear the sound and it's going to happen. And I'm not sort of limiting the mix where it's like, oh no, there's too many instances or too many voices, but it's all very quick and transient where like it does its thing and gets out of the way.
So what kind of like specific things are you doing? Maybe you mentioned a bit with ducking the music for certain kind of VO. When I listen to those older games, I mean, obviously there's no mixing strategy. It's like you have the music and you have a bunch of punches underneath it. So yeah, what are you doing differently for something like this? And actually, are you trying to meet halfway and keep anything remaining retro in the mix?
No, I wouldn't say so. Not for Marvel. It was really like, it was sort of evaluating how much stuff was going to happen at once and controlling that. And really, that's where powerful tools like FMOD really came into play, where it was like, okay, I've got 4 players on screen swapping, right? I've got like, I don't know, like Storm and Spider-Man and She-Hulk and Captain America on screen. It's like everybody's going like, whoo, and big, you know, thumps, and they're doing a special attack and it's like blazing shields. And it's like there's so much stuff happening. And there's a soundtrack on top of it as well, which is what most casual players want to hear. They just want to vibe to a cool soundtrack and beat up some bugs. So you have to keep that into consideration. And I was like, I'm not going to make this retro, because if you play old arcade retro games, they were made for cabinets. They were, made to sound good in a wooden box in a very crowded environment. And like the music is loud, but like the punch sounds are these huge, like white noisy, like all the time. And I'm like, I can't have that in my game. It's cool to, I designed my own and sort of use it in layers here and there, but I can't just, it doesn't really work. And it didn't work for me with music that's very well produced by T, and then sound, if the sound design didn't gel with that, it was going to be strange. And the other big factor was VOs. Like, we have such an unbelievable cast of people, like people you would expect to do voices for Wolverine and Spider-Man, and I wasn't going to compress those and make them sound crappy. I wanted to really design voices for Annihilus, for Captain, for Storm. Like, we all know how Storm sounds when she says like, elements, heed my command. It's like, it has to be big. And so I really wanted to do that. And I don't know if it's selfish or I'm kind of breaking our own rules, but I designed the crap out of those things and I put them in the game. And that sort of was my direction, knowing that I want the audio to be hi-fi or well-made, well-produced. And it might be one of the most overproduced like beat 'em up games, I think, in terms of audio. But I'm just one guy, there's only so much I could do, but I'm really proud of, I think, what I did. Yeah.
I think that's a great approach. I think it's an approach you took, and I think that, that approach was warranted for some, for reasons.
Yeah.
I just wanted to backtrack a bit, because you were talking about characters, we're talking about VO, we're talking about making them unique. Okay, well, I guess that there is my question. It's just sort of like, okay, 15 characters, and we haven't mentioned this yet, actually, on the podcast, but you're alone doing this, right?
I am, yeah. I'm the sole sound designer. Yeah.
So 15 different characters that you want all sound unique. There's a ton of VO lines to sort of edit, put in there. Like, I guess just starting with that, how did you make them unique? What did you pull from in order to sort of achieve that?
Well, it was one of my pillars. Like one of my audio pillars was retro feel with a modern punch or something like that, where it pretty much sums up what we've been talking about, where it's like it plays like you remember, it sounds like you would hope an old game would sound. It's like big sounds and whatever, but like keeping in mind that it's not a AAA game. And right down to KOs. Like if you KO an enemy, it goes, doo, doo, doo. You know, there's cliches and delays and stuff that I use there. But for characters, one of my other pillars was originality, straight up for characters, because Spider-Man is such a powerful character, like in terms of images and brands, and like a thwip sound, which is the actual description for the web shoot, has to sound like a thwip. Like if we're gonna go that direction, it can't sound like bloop. It can't be weird. Like if we're gonna go super old arcadey or whatever, I can do that. But there's a VO on top of the actor going like, you know, web coming through, or like slow down pal or something like that. So I have to have that sound. So some time went into looking, you know, at how it's made, which is, you know, you cast a fishing line and you get some shaving cream, and it's like a mix of all these things that I put together. And I think I kind of nailed it. But it was like, okay, that's Spider-Man. And then you look at lesser known characters like Nova, for example, or Rocket, that we haven't really seen much of in video games, where it was like, it's crazy because I get to define what they sound like for a while. So it was like, I'm going to make them unique and give them their own signature and really design stuff just for this character. So all the player hits are common. It's like, if the player get hits, it's the same sound that's shared for everyone because it's kind of more of a feedback thing. But when She-Hulk does her throw, it's like it's heavier, whooshy sound that goes whoo, like that. And when Rocket does a thing, you know, one of his attacks, it's very light with, you know, some claws in there because he's got little claws and what. So it's all very unique and tailored to every character. Because I told myself, I'm like, these characters, they're so huge, they're so unique, and they're so powerful. People know them so well, and a lot of people expect them to sound a certain way. And I think my job is to serve that. Where it's like, Rocket's special attack is just, he goes out guns blazing, huge amount of guns, and just goes like da 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 da, and he goes like that. I'm like, man, it has to be like insane, off the wall.
Yeah.
So I kind of did that, where it's like every character has to be the most faithful design I can make for it. And that's really where I was like, let's go all in. Let's just do it. And it was such a blast. Like Rocket was insane because he has grenades that he throws, and they're all sort of damage types that you find elsewhere in the game. So like slowing down and cosmic damage and fire damage, and it helped me define other things that came in the game later, like other enemies have cosmic damage, so I used that. So it was all sort of a way to define the audio language of the game, and making sure that everything's absolutely different. It's the same for bosses. You know, if you fight Taskmaster, you expect this unique, powerful thing. You know, if you fight Beetle, which we haven't seen that much in games, not recently, like he's got a huge electro beam. I just wanted it to be unique and his thing, and for it to sound awesome.
You mentioned the presence of dynamic music in the game, which is not something that's commonly heard in retro games. I was just wondering, you talked about using FMOD this time around, and that was a first for Tribute, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Most of our sounds are made in engine. There's a sound engine in there, and we still use that, but we use we use FMOD at that point to just control the mix a bit better at that point, and have extra features like variations and dynamic music.
Did bringing FMOD in was sort of a reaction to increasing needs from the audio team? Well, from you basically. Or was it the other way around of like, we're bringing in FMOD, so do whatever you want to do with it kind of thing?
It was definitely the former, where it was actually T's request, because T works on a lot of games, knows what's up. And when I came in, they told me, they're like, we're using FMOD for this project because T asked for it. And I'm like, well, thank you, nice. T, because I come from a middleware world, and I think it's essential in this day and age to at least have some extra control on audio, because people expect that. Retro game or not, people expect really good quality audio. And like something we don't really do now is, support for 5.1, 7.1 or 714 and everything. But that I maybe one day would like to explore with Tribute, though I'm not sure it's, exactly in line with what we want to do. But at least having FMOD for me was like, okay, I get to, if I need some side chaining, there's a compressor in there and I can do it, something I couldn't do before. Or if I need just a master volume knob on the end of the project, because it's like, if I look at my meters and it's like, oh, I've been playing the game for an hour and I'm at minus 18 LUFS or something, like that game's a bit loud. I need to, so just mixing on a sort of very audio bus mixer level is such a godsend, because it's just like, oh, I don't have to go back in the engine, find the song, find the exact sound and enter the value and then save and retest it. It's just like, no, I'm live mixing and I just, pick that bus and whatnot, mute it, or do whatever I need to do with it, and just having that much control is a very useful thing. So it's like T requested that we use FMOD, and I think at this point I'm like, I want to use it for every single project that we do moving forward. Comes like, look what we did, look how awesome this game sounds, and I love not using it sometimes because it's another just sort of creative limitation that you have to work with. But when we realized how powerful it was exactly like you said. It's like, okay, you have it, do what you need, do what you want with it.
I'm kind of curious how you used it specifically with, pitting the sounds against, well, all the sounds against the music. Did you have separate layers for different content in the music that you would, be able to sort of give some breathing room for sound design? Or actually, also, did you have conversations with T-Lopes about sort of like, frequency, like where your frequencies are taken up in your sound design and the music? Did you work together like that?
Well, the first conversations we had were just about directions, which I described earlier, and then it was sort of ideas to really push beat 'em up music and adding dynamic music, but in a somewhat restrained way, where it's like, if the classic is always there's exploration and then puzzles and then combat and boss, right? But in a beat 'em up, if I were to change the music every time there's an encounter, it'd be hell. So it was really like, let's do levels and the boss fight, and that sort of transitions relatively quickly without it necessarily being musical, because there's a common boss fight theme, but every level has its own track. But there's some cutscenes in between. There's space for me to sort of squeeze that transition. Nobody notices, and you're all of a sudden you're fighting the boss, and the transition happens. Then there's stuff where, like, when the boss's HP goes below 50, we go into sort of an enraged mode where the boss does extra attacks, moves faster, maybe harder to reach, or starts destroying stuff that helps you fight him, and so immediately we wanted the music to transition, something that we did in TMNT as well. But in TMNT was like exactly at that frame, at that, moment, it transitions. Right. Doesn't matter if we're in the middle of if we're on upbeat of this, second beat or something, it just happens. So at least now with FMOD, I can just have a loop region and have like wait 2 bars at least for that transition file to happen. And then, so it's a bit smoother. It's still somewhat drastic, which is in line with the more retro aesthetic, where we allow ourselves to be kind of, more, I'd say, stark, probably crude in our approach, but it's still there. And there's stuff that's really insane where it's like, when you transition from part 2 to part 3 in the helicarrier, like you get out of the elevator sequence, we just wait like for the end of a theme to happen, like the end of the measure to finish, and then we transition to this like very intense thing with like a cutscene with AIM soldiers fighting and whatnot. It's like, whoa, man, that, like, you didn't hear that before as you were playing the other 2 parts of the level, and just raising the stakes for the levels in the game at sort of a more macro level, and producing this soundtrack for a game that just keeps the stakes keep rising until you defeat the main bad guy. Was really awesome. So that's most of the conversations we had was on a more sort of creative level. T is a very, very, very fun person to work with, very like easygoing, and trusted me 100% with whatever I wanted to do. We had notes, we exchanged sort of mixed notes. And I was kind of the same way. It's like, write the soundtrack you want to write and I'll take care of the rest. So sometimes I'll duck lower frequencies on the music when certain attacks happen just to control the basses and the bass frequencies. Sometimes it's the opposite, where it's like, if it's a big music moment, maybe those sounds can go away a bit or be a bit less loud. But there's no like, we discussed making stems and sort of hitting pause. And so the melody goes away and it's like, but we
Right.
realized it was a lot of work for just two guys to make, and we didn't have that much time left. So we thought that having a really cool soundtrack with some of those features was probably the best middle ground and the best way to serve the game, which kind of goes back to my approach with audio. It's like, okay, I have all these tools. I'll make these sort of variations and make it like a beat 'em up plus plus without overworking myself or not being able to meet the deadlines.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
That makes a
you have to
sense.
keep in mind the game you're working on being a beat 'em up and the sort of how busy things can get. So if you adopt that position by design of being like, okay, let the music rip first. Let's avoid the overcomplicated, over-engineered solutions. Might make for an easier time for you and for T-Lope. So yeah.
And it's just like, it's compression and side chaining and really nothing too nerdy or complicated. And I'm not Andy Wallace either. Like I know how to mix an album and all that, but I didn't want it to make it too complicated and hard to manage and sort of hard to go back to if we have a support update or something like that, where it's like I look at the mix and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? And like if I open the FMOD session, I'm like, I know what happens and I know, what's sort of going on and how to control the mix.
I'm assuming you have to let go at a certain point when it's that notion of having a game that can be played by one or then played by four players at the same time. You can't be delivering that super tight experience that only works for one player and then it feels super busy at four or vice versa.
Yeah, it's like I don't really have a choice where it's like I want every action to have its sound and its feedback, but you kind of plan for the worst where it's like, okay, four players sounds okay. It's a lot of noise, it's a lot of transients, but one player is like the optimal thing, and it's like everything in between is fine to live with somewhat. It's, I keep going back to making records because it's what I know most. It's like, you mix. I have a pair of Aventone cubes here because I know that some people listen on crappy systems, and I have a little Logitech old desktop, sound system here, where it's like I need to recreate this too much sub or not enough basses, or on your Sennheisers are probably the most faithful to me, a pair of headphones, and it's like I want to recreate this thing and sort of shoot for the middle and make sure that everything works around that. And it's the same with just mixing and designing the game, where it's like, I know that four players are going to play, and that's going to be a lot of it, but a lot of people are just going to play on the bus single player, and you have to find the middle ground that works and where all the information is there and all the transients and sounds and the identity and the VOs and the music, everything sort of works.
Because you're also telling a story with this game. It's not the traditional beat 'em up of having the end of screen, you get the transition, seeing, I don't know, like in TMNT, like Statue of Liberty wakes up, boss fight. Sounds like it's more of an active story that's being told.
Yeah, there's that's really something that I have to give props to Yannick, because he wrote a really, really cool story, and the lines that he wrote are so, like, they're so how could I say this? Like, there are lines that's like, yeah, that's such a Captain America line. That's such a Spider-Man thing to say. And the guy knows his references. He is our Bible when it comes to like deep cut stuff, where it's like, would you think that AIM soldiers would do this? And it's like, well, actually, he knows all this stuff, and it's insane. And down to sound design, I'm like, what kind of technology does AIM use? Is it derived from this thing? Because I was like, this is going to sound like this, and he knows all that stuff. But to go back to sound in general, like, he wrote a really cool story that we wanted to tell through the game. So they're sort of panel cutscenes where there's a lot of setup, and it's like, why are we in New York City right now? But there's also stuff that happens as you're playing the game. So as you're beating up people and whatever, Captain America goes like, MODOK has been captured by AIM. We need to go this and do that and whatever. And we wanted that to pierce through. And so sometimes that's the priority, where it's like, okay, music needs to go away. The sound effects need to go away, and you hear that, and there's no denying that that's what happened with subtitles. And then you can go on beating up bad guys.
That's a cool maybe deviation from this kind of game, because when you think of a beat 'em up, you think of like, okay, just get me to the next section where I can beat people up and stories, whatever. And so
To set up for a fight.
yeah, totally.
Like we had the opportunity to when casting came into play, where it's like, yo, we can get like Matt Mercer on this game, and we can get, Steve Bloom and Cal Dodd on. Wait, Cal Dodd's gonna be Wolverine. It's like, okay, let's use him, and let's, like, I want him to say bub at least once in the game. So like we really leverage that, and it sort of goes back to the whole thing I was saying, where it's like we have this opportunity to have like these crazy voice actors, this amazing soundtrack. Let's just make sure that it serves the game, and in this case, the story as well. So that's one of the things we did that's really not like another beat 'em up. And it was our approach, even with Kevin, our level designer, and myself, and let's push the envelope just a little bit, almost too much where we can't handle it. But it's like, what if this level had branching paths? Like, what if you had two opportunities? You went into this, and then the cutscenes are different, and the music is different, and then you go back, and like to get the other option, you have to replay the game and go down another path. So we did that. And there's stuff like that with music, with the narrative arc, and with ambient pads as well, where it's like you're in a certain area. Well, we know that the attack is a bit stronger than it was earlier, so there's more ships around. There's there's more panicking in the ambience and all that. So it's really like.
So there's ambience in this. That's like I feel like you keep on mentioning things that are like breaking the mold of a beat 'em up.
Yeah.
Ambiences is the last thing I think about in a beat 'em up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I look, to be honest, it was kind of a last second commit where I almost gave up on it at some point. And I'd done New York, and it was so cool. And like, let's be honest, most people are not going to hear that, but the people who will appreciate it. And I knew that going in, and that was a last of my sort of things to check off was, what if I do AMs in this game? And I know Kev, who I mentioned a couple times, who I work, on a daily basis with, just crafting a soundscape for his level design. And it's like, what if in New York, when you get here, like you hear a bit more of this or that? And I'm like, I promise I will try to get that in. And it's like, I promise I'll try to be able to hear it when you're playing. And to be honest, sometimes you can't, because I had to make choices as well, like music first, VOs then, sound effects. And then, if you mute the music, you'll get, oh, look, I'm in New York City. You hear like traffic around, and they're not super over designed pads. They're fairly simple, but they're still there. And in New York, when you go, there's a wide open street area. And then as you progress, you go to an alley with like a little AC unit. And if you mute the music, you'll kind of hear the AC unit, and you'll hear like it feels a bit more like the action was towards the left and there's some action on the right. And it sounds more kind of in a hallway. And what's great about FMOD is that I can also take all my sound effects and voices and pass them through a snapshot with a reverb and echo that's unique to that area. Yeah. So I made these sort of zones, and it's just these boxes in the edge, and that when you pass through, it's like I flip a switch and have a snapshot, and it's like the voices all of a sudden have a bit more reverb and delay that sound more like this area.
Multi-strike! Send them packing, wall crawler.
Last one's free. Gotta focus. Feeling astonishing. Free food? Sweet!
Shield sling!
So it's like stuff that most people are not, even describing that, I'm like, what a nerd. But,
it's a cool approach. I'd love to see games that take this sort of environmental storytelling or whatever it may be, beat 'em up games that take that more seriously. I mean, that could be a cool approach to just the game. In general.
And it's what I know. I love rooms and spatial ambient reverbs, or spatial, AK portals and other. I love that stuff, and I kind of miss it sometimes. I was like, I asked JF, our co-founder, technical director, I'm like, can you make me a trigger box? That's like when I'm in there, it just plays a loop, and I promise I'll add value to the game. He was like, yeah, sure. He gave it to me, and I was like, and I showed that at a show and tell at some point. I'm like, if you walk in here, you hear that, and people were like, that's cool. And so I put it everywhere that sort of I managed to do it, or that I feel it added value. I did it. There's some levels where it's just not worth it, because the music is so banging and it's so insane that I'm not going to add stuff for adding stuff's sake. But there's places where it just adds a bit more context and
This sounds a bit like
it just adds a
the
bit
cherry
more
on the cake. Yeah.
nerdy touch that, helps me just talk about how cool the audio in this game is. And for, some people are going to mute the music for whatever reason. They're going to be like, what the hell? There's like, there's more life in this level. There's like, it's not just music and sound effects. It's a whole sort of living, breathing thing.
It feels like it's one of those situations where if we go back to the sound designer of the past being like, oh, I wish I could be doing this and that, feels like Ambiences probably were somewhere on that list too. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of the thing where it's like, I'm not sure they ever thought about doing it because it wasn't really it's like seeing time, or like a fourth dimension that we can't control, but that the aliens probably can. It's like, we don't think about that stuff, right?
Right.
But if I opened your eyes to it, would you do it? It's like, hell yeah, I would. So it's really this thing where it's like, if you had those tools, would you have done that? Not anywhere, not everywhere in every level, but where I feel it makes sense.
Yeah, there's opportunities for that for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what I did for this game, where it's like, oh man, it's an elevator sequence or a train sequence or something. Let's hear some rails and let's hear some speed.
Yeah, for sure.
And not add it to the music track either, where it's like, if you mute the music, there's no music, and then you hear that whole sort of soundscape.
Yeah. I guess, we covered pretty much everything we've said to talk about, sound design, the tech, the music, narrative. I guess we're getting to the end of it now. So what is next for you now that you're kind of finishing up Marvels?
Coming down from this high, I think is a healthy thing to do, because I crunched myself a bit towards the end there just to squeeze in those ambiences and some mix passes. At this point where I'm not as involved, where I am working on Scott Pilgrim a lot more, which is another game we have coming out soon. And I have to shift my mind back to that audio direction, which is completely different, which has been tricky all around because I've been working sort of in parallel between the two projects. But I was really in a big Marvel focus for the last little while. And now I have to sort of bring myself back to the Scott Pilgrim world. And then it's launching the game and sort of hoping for the best. I really hope that people play and enjoy this game. It's a really, really cool beat 'em up. I think it's something that's never been done before. It's really something else and something different. And like I said before, kind of pushing the envelope of beat 'em ups, where there's a swap mechanic. There's branching paths. There's a really cool story that you sort of can't ignore and that people are going to love. And let's be honest, like, you get to kick ass with Wolverine. I think we've been waiting a long time to do that. And 14 other characters. So I think it's a really, really cool thing that we made that we can't wait for people to play. And then after that, it's support, to be honest. For me, I think I'll keep, playing it and adjusting the mix. And I'm sure that my fellow audio community will probably have things to say that I'm all ears for. It's like, oh man, the game has this problem or that problem. And if I have the chance to fix some of those things, I definitely will. It's definitely my biggest game just by myself. And I'm just crossing my fingers, hoping that like the creative vision and this technical vision that I had works for people, and that it doesn't, that the audio sort of never brings anybody out of the music, out of the game itself, and just adds value to it. That's all I want. I just want people to enjoy themselves playing this badass game that we made.
Based on that, I have one final question, which is sort of our signature, we do it all the time question. And it's based on where you are today, or we could say you're pretty much done. As you were saying, like what you're doing now is mostly tweaks and polish. Now that you're done, quotation mark, with the game, would you have any sort of advice to give your past self when you joined on that project? Like if you could whisper in the night, be like, hey, don't forget.
There's several pieces of advice. The first thing would be to trust your creative vision. I can't help but feel like an imposter most of the time. And I feel like even though I've been, practicing the art of making sounds forever and making music, and just, I feel like I went to this, I'm like, who the hell am I to make this kind of game? But I did it. And I did it, and it is what it is. And it's like, that's sort of the thing where it's like, go for it. Believe in yourself, believe in the audio vision. The other thing would be to don't be so bent on recording your own sounds because I know it's the best thing in the world. And I really like, we could talk hours about field recording and all that stuff. It's the best thing to just have your own collection of sounds. And I have an extensive collection of my own sounds, but sometimes Boom Library has the construction kit that you need. And it's like the sound is right there. And if you layer it correctly, nobody's going to know that it's one of those that everybody uses. But it's like, it's okay to do some kit bashing at some point. And that's really how I see it, where like, you know, the people who designed models for Star Wars back in the day, they bought kits and they just kit bashed and designed the Millennium Falcon from other parts of other things. And they made this unique thing with it. And that's how I see audio design in such a short production time, where it's like, yeah, I could go and like redesign this whole thing, or like I'll buy a bunch of libraries and things, and I have Soundly and I have all these Boom libraries and Soundmorph and whatnot on top of my own collection, and that's good enough to make a really, really cool sound.
Don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, right?
No, man, because like a punching sound is a punching sound, and you can try punching chairs and benches and all you want, but it's like sometimes it already exists, so just take it.
Especially when you're doing the solo too, right? To record for every single sound. I mean that
it's impossible.
That wouldn't be best for production.
Yeah, there's some things that I really needed. Like there's some unique things, and sometimes like your library so well, so it's so fast and so easy. But I bought a bunch of libraries towards the middle of the production because like, and I would never use a sound as is. That's a thing though, where I use construction kits. And it's part of a layer, like a sweetener or something. But guys, it's okay to do that. That would be my message to myself and to people in general. Like that's what they're made for. So go ahead and use them. Like, why would I forge a hammer if I can go buy a Milwaukee one at Home Depot? Like the tool is there. I'm just going to use it. Not everything has to be homegrown, you know?
Yeah, that's perfect advice for folks out there. So thank you so much for taking the time today. It was super cool to learn about MCI, Marvel Cosmic Invasion.
Sticking with the MCI thing.
Yeah.
I love it.
MCI. MCU MCI. So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thanks so much for having me, guys. I think it's a wonderful things you guys are doing to give people with such good mics a microphone, a megaphone to talk. I mean, this isn't all good of a mic, but I think it's a really cool thing that you guys are doing, and I think I hope to come back at some point with another project so we can talk some more. It's been a really really fun, enjoyable experience, and I hope you find a lot of success with this cool podcast, and I'll certainly be listening. I can't wait for the episode with Antoine to see what he has to say about his game, but I'm looking forward to the other episodes as well. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this cool game, and I hope everybody plays it and enjoys it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good luck on the launch.
Thank you.